At the end of the day, it's not about what you have or even what you've accomplished. It's about what you've done with those accomplishments. It's about who you've lifted up, who you've made better. It's about what you've given back. Denzel Washington. Welcome to Inspire Vision. Our sole purpose is to elevate the lives of others and to inspire you to do the same.
Dan, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure, and glad we're able to connect on different sides of the planet. But I love how technology makes it possible now.
Oh, it's wonderful. It's amazing to me that, here I thought you might be in the UK. Now you're in New York. And as you say, you've been traveling all over. So it's great that we can do this.
The world's getting smaller.
I would love for you to share with the audience kind of who you are and the story behind what helped you to reach this point in your life and what you're doing and why you're doing what you're doing to help other people.
Beautiful. Okay, so let me see if I can give you a good answer to that, because I'm 45 years old and who I am, I think, still is evolving, and I'm starting to grow into myself a little bit. If you look at the kind of professional side of me, then I'm a speaker and trainer. I speak a lot on the ideas of sales and psychology. I'm a behavioral scientist, and effectively I teach salespeople how to help people make good decisions. And typically good decisions are aligned with purchasing decisions around sales. So that's kind of the corporate space. I apply those same psychological principles to my own life. I'm a bodybuilder, a natural bodybuilder, and I'm kind of preparing for another competition, which I have in 4 weeks, which is the world title. So I'm kind of currently in that kind of headspace to really challenge myself and push myself outside of my comfort zone. And then if you ask family who I am, I'm Dan. I'm like the hyper competitive one that likes winning all the board games, but probably eats a little bit too much cake when I come to visit. Typically has a good word to say, but can sometimes get a little bit cranky. How else would people talk about me? Probably those kind of things. So that's kind of me. And I'm a dad, and I have an amazing daughter. We're, like you said, we're currently based in New York. Her school is literally within earshot. So if the microphone isn't controlled too much, then you can probably hear her screaming, running around in the playground. And that's basically how I spend my time. And then the other part of me, which I'm still trying to grow into, which is the interesting piece, and we'll probably talk about this today, is this idea of being an author. So I've written 2 books over a period of 10 years. There was a period of 10 years in between when I started to realize that I could actually do this stuff. And I'm just writing my 3rd one. But there's that aspect of me is still growing. It's still one that I haven't fully grown into. So if you ask me in a year who I am, it'll probably be slightly more focused on the authoring and the writing. But for right now, I'm kind of this hodgepodge of talk about sales, do some bodybuilding. I'm slightly different color. You may be able to see on the video, slightly orangier. Orangier, is that the word? We'll go with it. From the fake tan from last week's competition. But yeah, I just enjoy life. I like to live at both ends of the spectrum as much as I possibly can and not rule anything out. So I'm as comfortable listening to hip hop, 90s hip hop and R&B as I am going to a theater. We went to see The Lion King on Broadway the other night as my mum's birthday present. So, I think we can all have lots of different experiences. I'm comfortable with that.
Okay, so major bodybuilder, and you're in a competition. I think that's cool. I keep struggling to try to do that better, but we're not going to talk about that today. So, what was there an aha moment that you've had, or was it just a gradual to where you started writing your books, obviously to reach out to other people? What caused you to decide that you really wanted to do what you're doing in helping people, besides the business part, in really helping people? Now, the latest book, is your latest book, The Personal Transformation Blueprint?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so that was a documentation of kind of how my mental journey for the bodybuilding. Yeah. Okay. But it applies to a lot of different things.
All right. So what was that aha moment, or was it just gradual that you kind of decided that, all right, I want to really help the community. I want to help other people?
So I've been in, I guess, the personal development, self-help space for a very long time. That's how it started in this whole training journey. A friend of mine gave me a CD. You guys know Anthony Robbins, the personal power CDs from back in the day. And at the time I was training athletes. So I was working in sport and personal training. He said, hey, listen to this. I think it'll help. And it really did. Like, I found it extremely interesting. So much so that I went and studied neurolinguistic programming and did my master practitioner and all those kind of things. And then that led to a business kind of engagement where they say, oh, can you go and teach this to some people over here? And I was like, okay, sure. And that kind of started my sales training career. So I started teaching neurolinguistic programming to business people and salespeople across Europe and UK and eventually all over the world. In that time, I wrote goals. You've probably written goals, right? And occasionally you find those little scraps of paper or the notebooks that you write them on. And there were certain goals that always came up, right? And one of them was sub 10% body fat because, you got to have, abs and all those kind of things and, kind of get programmed. Never hit that goal. Never. Up until recently, we were talking about that. Another one was write a goal setting book. I wanted to write a book on goal setting. There's tons of them out there. Never happened. Never happened. I had like every year I'd write these same goals down. For some reason, it never happened. Like I wrote other goals. Some of those, were able to happen, but these two were always out of reach. I don't know why. And then, so coming back to your question, like, was there a moment? There was a moment, and it was about 3 years ago, and we were on the beach. I don't know if you know England. There's an amazing beach called Weston-super-Mare. They have to add the super. I don't know why, but it's not that super. But it's great. As a kid, you grow up near the Bristol coast. And we were there. We were there with the family, and it was a sunny day. And I remember this because we had the daughter. It's like one of the first experiences at the beach. She ran around in the sand. She's like maybe a couple of years old. Family there, and it's a decent day. So take the shirt off, enjoy the sun, run around in shorts. They get splashed, but it's part of fun of being on the beach. Anyway, end of the day. Get the photos, and I see this one particular photo of me just standing there with no shirt on. And something different hit me. I don't know if you've ever looked at a picture of yourself. You see yourself in the mirror, and it's just you, right? It's you. But this one, I don't know why, but I saw something different. And I saw somebody who said a load of good stuff, but never really followed through. It's weird. I don't know why, but it was like very average. Like it's average body, average relationship, average career, just average everything. And I looked at it and I was like, oh, am I average? Like, is that what I am? Have I settled to be average? I talk about all these kind of go out and do these things and challenge yourself and push yourself, but there was this weird disconnect that I had. And all I saw was someone who had loads of excuses for reasons for not doing things. I can't put it any more than that. It was just this one photo triggered this idea that I just make excuses and I never challenged myself and I've never really seen anything through as far as I possibly could. And that was kind of a kick in the butt, it was kind of a moment of like, oh, okay. And so I had a choice. I was like, okay, well, are you going to just stay average or are you going to go and do something about it? And that was kind of, if you say, was there a moment? It was one single photograph that triggered it all off.
Wow. And it's amazing. I'm really curious because I noticed in your bio, and you've talked about the fact that you have that master's degree in behavior, but it's behavioral decision sciences. And I've not heard of that particular one before. I know the behavioral sciences, but the behavioral decision, what is that? Why is that distinguished?
I guess there's probably two answers to that. One is the marketing answer, which is the university probably had to put some spin on it to make it sound a little bit more interesting than others. But for me, the reason I like that is there's behavioral science. So we can look at things like nudge. Can you control people and can you encourage them to do things by creating environments where they make choices that make sense, or better choices, So right. I was having this conversation with a friend of mine the other day. He's very libertarianism. He's like, freedom for everyone make the same choices. I'm like, that's great, but they still put warnings on domestic cleaners not to drink them. So we have to control people. People aren't dumb, but they don't always make great decisions. So there's this idea of paternal libertarianism, which is you have freedom of choice, but we're going to guide you if you don't know it. So for example, if you install a computer program, none of us are computer programmers, so we always hit the default option because we trust that is the best option for us. But is it? I don't know. But only say 5% of people ever update the basic settings. So we have to trust that some of the choices that are being made for us are good. And then the rest of the choices are ours to make, right? Or we at least think they're ours to make. And yet we make some howlers. We make some absolutely terrible decisions. And for me, the reason to study this is twofold, right? So first of all, I teach salespeople to influence people's decisions. So I should probably understand how people make decisions. But then the second part is, hey, Dan, look back across your life. You made some terrible, terrible decisions. What were you doing? Like, what were you doing? What was going on in your head? And on the other side of that, then, is how can I make fewer terrible decisions moving forward? But everything that we do comes down to a moment of choice, right? Our choice of what to do, what to have for breakfast, what to spend doing during our day, what clothes do we wear? All of these things are choices, and they influence us moving forwards. We can't do anything about today. All of those decisions have been made that bring us up to today. But for tomorrow, and if we want to change, and again, coming back to that photo, if I want to change who that person is that I see in the picture, I can't change the history, but I can change what I do from today moving forwards. But it's got to be conscious. If I just go with my automatic programming, if I go with the status quo, then tomorrow I'm going to wake up and it's going to be the same me. And if I'm happy with the same me, then great. But if I want to evolve, I want to change, I want something different, then I need to make different decisions. And so that's kind of the thing, I guess, is really understanding, why do we make decisions and how do we make better ones?
Okay. And how do you find the correlation? Because I find this very interesting. You work with bodybuilders, and, as we look in general at all of the activities that go on with football and baseball and all those activities, bodybuilding and so forth, you see that. And I know that based on a lot of interviews that I've done, that the body, using the body to move and to do all those things, really can help in a sense of being able to make some changes in our lives and understand what's going on. At the same time, you read some of these incredible stories that are just a nightmare, where, here they are, and yet they're not making good choices. What have you found when you're working with people in business, for instance, where, an NLP, obviously, for the folks that don't know what that is, I think it can be used in a couple of ways. One, if you're in sales and in business, NLP is really amazing on how you can help people to make decisions. All right. And then I'll not go any further than that. But NLP also, if you get more into the personal aspect, is you're able to help people understand why they are making the decisions that they're making. And if those decisions are negative or not really helping the individual, then using some NLP processes, you're able to help identify and then remove some of those subconscious belief systems that are literally causing the decisions to be made. What are your thoughts on that?
So many things there. And just for people who are listening, so NLP is this idea of neuro-linguistic programming. It was come up with, it was designed way back by two people. One of them was a computer programmer and one of them was a linguist. And this idea of, can we use language in the same way that we can program computers and effectively understand the coding and the way we code processes in our brain. So just for understanding, that's all it is. It's a pattern of language or language patterns that we can use. And then you can obviously build different programming. So like you said, we can change people's limiting beliefs or understand programs by using this kind of common phrasing or language. And so I'm also an athlete. I used to be a sports person. I used to play American football as a Brit. That's not very common, but I've kind of played sport. My current challenge is bodybuilding. I tried trying to run an Ironman for once. That was not a good choice. But you make life choices and sometimes you learn from them. Don't repeat the pattern. So I think the question was, or what was the question? It was, what have I found? And it's like the crossover, I guess, between sport and business and how we can use all these things. And I think there's a few things, and it's really the first step is always awareness, right? First step is always awareness, is look at the situations and try and understand the situations that we're in. And the biggest thing I think in kind of understanding situations is that we actually don't make decisions. We don't. We go with default, or what I have to deal with a lot in sales is status quo. So status quo bias. Status quo bias says it's really hard to get going. Was it Newton's first law of motion? It's like an object at rest tends to stay at rest. Like that kind of idea is that unless something comes in and kicks us in the butt, or there's a force applied or something, we're not going to do anything. We're just going to stay the same. And this is what This is ironically, this is what I call the trap of average, is that most people are in a situation where average is okay. And we don't have this burning need to change. We're not, you know, life isn't failing, we're not down and out, we don't have all these problems, we see all these kind of rag to riches stories. We're like, oh, life isn't that bad, so we're okay. But we're also not happy enough to be able to celebrate. So we're in this kind of weird no motivation zone that never kicks us in the butt unless something happens, right? And we wait for these life events like a diagnosis, or somebody telling us something that we had no idea, or something completely comes out, or we're fired, or something like that. We wait for these things to happen to nudge us out of this status quo bias. Salespeople, this is their entire job. The salespeople, my job is to call you and nudge you out of your status quo. Like, everything was good until the salesperson arrived. Now I have a problem. Thanks, salespeople. That's why people don't like salespeople, is they just introduce, if they're good, they introduce problems that I now have to fix. I had enough problems. Thank you very much, salesperson. But that's the hardest thing, right? So most problems are typically caused by status quo because we don't take proactive action. Like, for example, do you have, it's late, I've got my coffee, right? So here's my coffee. I'm a little New York mug. How do I take my coffee? How do I take my coffee? I probably have it the same way as I always do. And for years, that was a lot of milk and a lot of sugar and syrup. And then one day something happened to ruin that. And do you know what happened? Starbucks put calories on the menu. Thank you, Starbucks. You absolutely ruined it. Because I went in thinking coffee. Hey, it's coffee. What's the worst that can happen? Apparently 500 calories is the worst that can happen. That was like my kind of grande latte, caramel, frappuccino with extra shot of all of these things. And now suddenly I'm like given some new information which says it's probably not a good idea. And so this is what's the challenge with status quo, is we never get out of it. And so the first thing for anybody to look at is to evaluate where they are. And if it's, a lot of people hate my job, hate my career. I've got a conversation in a little while. It's like, oh, I've got these opportunities. Like, what should I do? It's like, okay, well, look at the status quo. Where are you? Like, and how did you get there? And is there a pattern that you keep running through to get into this situation where you feel stuck or annoyed or frustrated? And look at the decisions that lead you to this point. Are you doing something every day that kind of creates this treadmill effort? So that's the kind of the first thing. The second thing is say, okay, well, what do I need to change? Like, do I need to make a different decision? Do I need to change my behavior? And if I do, then what is that transition? What does that gap look like? Right? Where does that go? And typically, if we're going to do something, then we need to change. If we're going to do something sustainable, we need to change our identity. Right? We need to think of ourselves as a different person and then behave in accordance with that. We can, tie our shoelaces differently, or we do something very superficial, but that isn't going to create lasting change. So anytime you want to create lasting change, it's an identity thing. So for me, like I said earlier, if I want to be an author, I have to think of myself as an author, and I have to act as an author. But there's a gap, and that gap is imposter syndrome. And that gap is that little voice that says, yeah, but Dan, you're not an author. Like, you're not an author, you're a terrible writer. And I can even hear my English teacher's voice from back in the day. It's like, nah. And so we have to overcome that. And a lot of people can't overcome that imposter syndrome, or we doubt ourselves, or we do it a little bit, and then we're like, nope, I hope people don't see us, and we kind of dial it back. And so that's the big challenge, is overcoming that.
Yeah, and as you were studying the behavioral sciences, did you get involved, or have you got involved in any of the analyses that help people to understand their personality and their profiling and so forth? And what I find really interesting, and I want to get into something that you talk about a little bit, and that is this imposter syndrome. Okay. And as I've used that profiling the way that I happen to use it on an individual basis, I really look at how, we are who we are. I mean, there is that innate individual that oftentimes we have no clue who we are. Then there's that social who we need to be personality. And I think that becomes the definition of the imposter syndrome. We are who we think we need to be. We are who the society tells us we have to be, who religion, who school, who everything tells us we need to be. And then ultimately we are who we really, truly choose to be. And And how many people do you find are literally living that imposter syndrome and don't actually even realize that they're doing that?
If you look at the research for imposter syndrome itself, about 70% of people have imposter syndrome. I would love to be one of those 30% that just goes around with this unbelievable self-confidence or naivety in my own lack of ability, but it's about 70%. And it is contextual, right? It is contextual that, sometimes I feel very confident in an area, sometimes I feel out of confidence, and, so sometimes I'm really good at things, sometimes I'll follow through. But typically, at least 70% of people would experience imposter syndrome from time to time. I'm just trying to think what the core of the question was.
Let's go a little bit further.
Yeah.
When people, you make the comment, and I love it, and we're all in this, situation where you're still trying to figure out who you are, and that's why I love that question. Who are you? But who am I? When we ask that question of ourselves, who am I? And then we start to watch our behavior. I have a saying, and it's somewhat religious. So for those of you that are not religious, I apologize. But from a Christianity standpoint, every once in a while, when someone really gets into, you need to do this, you need to do that, this is how you need to do it, and I'll just say, okay, I have a question for you. For those of you that understand who Christ is, did he do what he did to become Christ? Or did he do what he did because he was Christ? Mm-hmm. And then I bring that into, as we look at our behaviors, we look at our actions, are we doing that because we hope to become something? Or do we do that because we already are, and therefore we do? And if we notice then that, we want to change that a bit, as you talk about, then what that really means is we need to figure out how do we change that internal innate person to become so that it becomes a natural, fluid result.
So let's take that example. And it's hilarious. And I grew up in a Christian family, and my family still goes to church. I'm still yet to decide, and I don't necessarily believe in labels, but let's say there is definitely something out there, and we all call it something different to avoid fighting with each other. But let's take this example, right? It comes down to a moment, right? Christ is there, and he's like, I could get out of this, right? He has some amazing, crazy superpower that Marvel could only dream of. But he's like, I could get out of this. Dad, I need a favor. Get me out of this crazy situation. They're about to put me up on this cross, hammer me into this thing with nails. Like, get me out of here. There's definitely that option, right? There's definitely that option. And yet he chooses in that choice, right, to go through. He follows through with whatever path was set out. Okay. But this is what people forget. That's one thing. Let's rewind. Let's look at all of those moments in his entire life where he had to act as if that person, right? He had to act as if he was the Son of Christ, right? Because he was like, hey, I'm the Son of Christ. It's like, come on, man. Like, everybody doubted him. Everybody was like, there's no such thing as Son of Christ. Like, we have this God over here. There's a different one. He's better than you. Look at these temples. So much money. Like, you can't be that. You're poor. You just make little kind of figurines on the side of the road. Like, what? You're not, come on. And at any point along that journey, he could have gone, yeah, you're right. I'm just a carpenter, like pretending. So over time, he had to reinforce his belief. He had to keep saying it. And there would have been times, and you hear about this, I think it was temptation in the desert or something like that.
Right.
40 days or whatever it is. And I think that's where Lent comes from, is he was tempted by the devil, for 40 days to kind of renounce all of this idea. And he's like, no, I'm stick with it. I'm going to stay with my story. Now, just that's as far as I go into the Bible. So let's stay with that. But let's think about what people and their challenges do. So let's say I set this goal, my ambition, and I'll tell you my bodybuilding story a little bit. Is I said, right, I'm going to do this bodybuilding challenge. I'm going to step on stage and I'm going to kind of, fake tan myself up and do all of these kind of things. And I'm going to say I'm a bodybuilder. And I had to say I was a bodybuilder long before I stepped on stage. I think Muhammad Ali has this quote. He said, I told people I was the greatest long before I even stepped in the ring, right? You have to declare something before it even happens. But up until that point, you have no reference, you have no proof, you have no concept, you have no understanding, you don't have the experience, you haven't got any reason to say that you're that thing. So I would tell people that I'm a bodybuilder, but I'd never experienced bodybuilding. And so in my head, there's this moment, it's like, no, Dan, you're not a bodybuilder. You haven't done anything. Like, well, you keep telling people you're a bodybuilder. But I had to say it. I had to say it because I had to act as if. And then the way to overcome that imposter syndrome is just to do it, is to have discipline, to show up, and to make choices every single day that allow you to eventually realize that goal. So if I come back to mine, it was every single day, well, not every single day, but on my training plan, I would go to the gym every day. And I did this for 14 months. Every day, I would weigh the exact amount of food that I would eat, like literally down to the gram. I'd like take little tweezers and take one oat out of it. Not quite, but you know. But for 14 months, I weighed every meal. Like I go to dinner with family and I say, oh, that much this, that much that, and those kind of things. And nobody could see that. Nobody sees any of those aspects. And so there's public decisions, and then there's private decisions. And typically there's more things that go on behind the scenes before you ever get to that point. And for me, there was a crossover. Like there's a moment in that journey where something happened that actually filled me with belief. So I went from imposter syndrome to, yeah, I can do this. And it was one of those mornings I was kind of waking up and wipe the sleep out of my face, go train in the morning before the family wake up, right? Super early. I go downstairs, do whatever you do in the morning, and kind of step on the scales and weigh yourself. And, you know, you take off the clothes because it makes you a little bit lighter, and you're like stepping on the scales. You're like, oh, am I there? And as I did that, I looked up and I saw a face in the mirror that I didn't recognize, and like some chest and shoulders. I'm like, whoa, who's that? That's what I want to look like. And I can't explain it, but there was this weirdness of like, oh, that's me. Like, and from that point, I was like, maybe I can do this. Maybe I am gonna be this thing. And that was that moment. And I don't know, I've had it with writing. Like I've had it where people are like, oh my God, like you wrote, that's amazing. Like, did you use Chat GPT? So like, no, I actually typed these things out and it actually came all together. There are moments in everyone's career where something just clicks and it feels like it's working. And all of that effort up until that point suddenly seems worth it. But up until that point, all of that effort seems to be going nowhere. But we have to do it.
And yet, as you became, all of a sudden, you were doing. And, you know, I love the idea of setting goals. And I wonder sometimes, I know there's all of us talk about affirmations and so forth. But the reality isn't a goal really an affirmation if you do it the correct way? You know, I am a bodybuilder. I am a bodybuilder. And there has to be that belief that you literally have that capability. Otherwise, it never happens. But when you have that belief, and then all of a sudden you become, because your behavior is you're doing what you need to do to become that very thing that you have affirmed that you are, all of a sudden there you are. And isn't that really the secret for anyone that wants to overcome whatever is going on in their lives and recognizing that, you know what, this is not what I want. I want something different. Then it takes a little bit of, you know, self-awareness and introspection to figure out what that is.
Yes and no is the answer.
Okay.
And the reason I say that, and I come back to the point from earlier, is who we are today is a result of all the decisions we've already made. We can't change the person today. And I've been looking back and going, oh, that was a good decision, that was a bad decision. Half our decisions are luck. All right, let's kind of go with that. So, and we are a product of, like you said, genetics, our environment, our social circle. So who I am today is a result of so many different aspects. But that doesn't have to be me tomorrow. And so if I'm in this point now where I'm like, okay, well, I want to do something different. I say I've realized that there's more for me to experience in life as like challenge myself, set a goal, whatever that is, or I want to change direction or do something that's more in line with who I am as an individual, like you say, not living someone else's life, but actually I want to do something that is more aligned with me. Then from this moment, I can start to act as if, and I can start to be the person that person is. And so that's where you're saying, right, I am this. And you're going to have that gap. There's a disparity, right, between the person who you want to be and the person that you are today. And this person, And by, this is where the kind of neurology comes in, is this person is well ingrained. Like for me to even change my coffee takes a lot. It's like, and that's a tiny little decision. It's just like, damn, it's ridiculous. Like, just do something different with your coffee. Yeah, I know, but I'm attached. I like it like that. And we get attached, right? We have this called endowment bias. Like the things that we do, we attach ourselves to, and we have our identity to it. So let go of that identity is scary for many people because that's certainty, that's comfort, that's who I am. We have people attached to that. We have relationships attached to it. We have meaning. We have memories. We have all these things. And so for me to change who I am says fundamentally, I'm not happy.
Yeah.
Which is tough. People don't want to say that. And this is the battle, because as soon as we do that, we can compare ourselves and say, but at least we're better than Bob. Bob bad, Bob has it. Bob is like, oh my God, do you hear what happened to Bob? It's like, our life isn't that bad. Take it easy. It's like, oh, okay. And then we take the pressure off, and now we're not going to change because we compared ourselves. And so the challenge is to say, I'm not happy. Like I'm not where I am or where I want to be, but I'm still good. Like I can feel grateful and I can feel appreciation for all of the experiences that have come. And so we're not doing change out of a position of anger, and frustration, because then we do something super crazy, but it's disparate. Kind of we fight everything and nothing at the same time. And so the idea is that we say, okay, well, let's go here. Let's go in this direction. And what does that person have to do, act, behave, think, eat, drink, sleep, all of those things in order to live like that person, knowing that we're not that person yet, except for the decisions that we make today. That's the journey. And so then that's discipline. So it's showing up every day in the same way. It's sacrifice. And I don't mean goats and virgins. That's what I always talk about, throwing things into volcanoes and hoping things get better. But sacrifice like chess. So I'm going to sacrifice a pawn so that I can get something else. So strategic sacrifice. So we can't have everything. If we're going to change something, balance has to shift. A lot of people try and do this and maintain life balance. It's like, it's not going to happen. You're going to have to change something somewhere. And so for me, I sacrifice in food. Like I can't eat candy, chocolate, ice cream. I have a 4-year-old daughter who wants to eat candy, chocolate, ice cream. So I'm looking and going, So, but that's a sacrifice, right? I sacrifice, but it's only for a moment, for a window. And then I can go and do some of these things and we have fun in different ways. Just don't involve food. But I can't have my cake and eat it, like literally. I have to sacrifice. I have to wake up earlier than most people because that's the time when my family life allows me to do these things. So I can't change and keep things the same at the same time, but I can adopt new habits and I can change my routines. And you made a really interesting point earlier, which is about the people. So there's a model that's called the theory of planned behavior. And it's this behavioral change model. And it effectively factors in 3 things. It says, if you want to change your behavior, there are 3 factors. And those 3 factors don't change behavior. They change the intention to have a behavior. It's crazy, right? So if I want to stop smoking, like back in the day, I don't know, it's the same thing, but if I want to stop smoking, I have to have an intention to stop smoking before I stop smoking. And my intention to stop smoking will be based around 3 things. It'll be based around my attitudes towards the behavior. If I still think of smoking as a social thing, as an engagement, as a relaxation, if I think that way, my attitude towards the behavior is that, I'm not even going to have an intention to change. So I've got to rewire, I've got to reprogram my thought process. The second one is what they call societal norms, or like social norms, which is your peer group. So if I'm surrounded by people who smoke all the time, do you think I'm going to change my behavior? No, because all the people around me are going to do these things. We hear this thing like you're the average of the 5 people you spend most of your time with. Well, yeah, like that's going to happen. And then there's this one, which is self-belief or self-efficacy, which is, do I believe that I can do this? Do I believe that I can do this? And this is where a lot of the psychology work and the kind of neurolinguistic and coaching and stuff can really be done, is in this belief pattern. And actually, belief has 2 aspects. Number one, it impacts the intention, but also has a major impact on taking intention to behavior, if you look at the model. So this is where self-perception, self-efficacy, self-belief, all of those things really play a part. And so if you want to change your behavior, like this is the thing. So you have to change your attitudes, which we can do. We can start to think differently. We have to change the people. This is the tough one. We have to.
That's a tough one.
not necessarily, but be intentional about who we spend time with. So if I want to be an athlete, we're going to go and hang around with people that are fitter than me, or who are going to challenge me to think about how I do things. Yeah, which is why, I don't necessarily believe in them, but things like Weight Watchers groups is you're surrounding yourself by people who have a common goal. You're going to stay focused on that goal, and you're going to act as if, not just necessarily because you want to do it, but also not to let other people down. So finding a society or a group or a network or peers that are doing something similar. So I'm trying to find writers at the moment. If anybody knows any writers in New York, then I'd love to hang out. But then the other one is this idea of self-belief. And that is, there's a few ways we can do it, but one of them is just break your goals down into lots of little pieces that allow you to feel success on a regular basis. So can I feel successful today as an author? Yeah, I think I can. If I can write 500 words or 1,000 words, I can call myself today an author. Like, I can confidently say that. Now, do I have to sacrifice things? Do I have to give stuff up to find time to write 500 words? Maybe. I'm not going to be able to have my same routine, same things. So I have to consciously step out of status quo, do something consciously differently, but then I'll feel good. And this is where there's a lot of talk about habits, right? Habits are super important. So if I do something every day, if I'm consistent, then I don't know what the timeline is going to be. Like, when the next book comes out, I don't know when that's going to be, but like, I'll be an author in that all that time. I'll be an author. And this is where, coming back to your point, is I am because I act that way. I wasn't, and I'm okay with that. And I've made my peace, and I accept that actually has given me very strong foundations to do what I'm going to do next.
Well, and you really described something, in my mind at least, that is talked about a lot, and I'm not sure how well understood it is, and that's this concept of mindset. And you talk about mindset, mental toughness, but to me, that's what you're describing, is that I'm going to develop the mindset that I'm not going to have the ice cream, which, is a tough one, but I'm not going to have the ice cream. I'm not going to do that, but I am going to do this. I am going to do that. And as you say, I love the concept of, writing the goal and then breaking it down into little steps. So many people, I think, write a goal and then they try to achieve that goal without ever breaking it down into little steps. I know when I was doing a little bit of consulting with small businesses, it's like, all right, this is what I want to accomplish. Okay, let's go back now. If this is what you want to accomplish, what would be the step right before that accomplishment occurred? Well, blah, blah, blah. Okay, what would have had to happen right before then? And all of a sudden you're going backwards to the point where you get to the true, all right, here's where you start. And now you follow that step little by little. And as you say, gratitude makes such a difference when we can start to be grateful for those little wins and for those little things that happen in our lives. It makes such a difference versus beating ourselves up because we didn't accomplish what we thought we should accomplish.
Yeah. The thing with goals, this is where I love them and find them frustrating at times, is they always have to be timed. SMART goals, right? Specific, measurable, time bound. And let's take your consulting thing. I want a $10 million exit. Like, that's my thing. We haven't sold one product yet, Bob. Why is it always Bob? I don't know. Dave, let's go with Dave. We haven't sold one product yet, Dave, and you want a 10 million exit. I think that's a worthwhile thing, but let's break that down. What do we need to have a 10 million valuation? How do we do that? Let's get the client. So then how do we get client number one? But when he gets client number one, that's like, we're on the board. Let's go. Like, because then one leads to two. And it's that idea of breaking things down. But yeah, the mental toughness is the idea that we've got to show up, and we just got to show up. That's, for me, that's half the battle. Like, it probably is more than half the battle. Is the quote is success is 99% perspiration, 1% inspiration, something along those lines. There's great ideas come along all the time, but it's are you willing to work at it? So I could have said I'm going to be a bodybuilder, but I never, did 2 or 3 workouts a week and maybe changed from milk to skim milk or something like that. That's not going to happen. I've got to go crazy. I've got to go. And there's this idea of passion to obsession, which a lot of people don't like. Is it takes obsession to get to the point where you're going to be massively successful. Most people look at that and go, Dan, isn't that a bit weird? Even my mum, right? My mum's over for the birthday this weekend. She's like, yeah, but you're going to have a rest sometime, right? You can't just push yourself like this all the time. I'm like, well, why not? Like, why not? Like you can't, you don't want to, but why can't I? Like the human body is capable of doing some amazing things, and I've got 5 weeks till 4 and a bit weeks or whatever it is to. I probably should check that to get ready. Like I can rest in 4.5. I can rest the day after the competition. In fact, that ice cream you were talking about, I'm preparing it now for that. 4 weeks, one day. I know what I'm going to eat. I know where I'm going to eat it. And I know who I'm going to be with. It's there. But for this phase of my life, this goal is important to me. Nah, I'm okay to sacrifice that. And this is where kind of the goals come in. So it's know what you want, but don't set a timeline. Like not always. Sometimes to put the pressure on, but for something like a business exit, there's too many external factors. Just show up today. Show up today. Do the thing. Like you're tired. I know we're all tired, right? There's distractions. You've got a million things that you could be doing. Don't go and do the thing that's easy. Do the thing that you need to do. Like face your challenges. Do all these things. And that's the mentality. And this is where athletes, like if we come back to the sport thing, this is where athletes know. So they know if I train in the gym today and I put my heart and soul and I do everything and I bleed and then tomorrow when I step on the field, maybe after a couple of days rest, I'm going to be able to do some amazing things. And so this idea is I invest my time and invest in the things that I know are going to lead to the goal, even though in those moments, it doesn't feel like I'm getting anywhere. So if you're a business owner, prospect, make the cold calls. Nothing is going to happen. Nothing is going to happen from making one cold call, sending one email. But in 6 months' time, someone's going to send you a message. Hey, are you still doing that thing? Because I need some help now. It's like, oh. So this is where momentum comes in. So all of those things, like I have, cut my calories by 200-300 today. Nothing is going to happen on scale. Nothing. If I walk down the steps instead of taking the elevator, nothing is happening today. But in 6 months, all of those activities add up. And I'm like, oh, how did I get here? How did I get here?
Well, and isn't it interesting? You take that focus and then imagine you take exactly what you're talking about from a business perspective and all of us and achieving goals, or whether it's, weightlifting or whatever that happens to be, bodybuilding. And now let's put that very same methodology into personal development and overcoming that life that you don't want to have. You're not happy. I talk to people about, look at what you are right now. Is this what you want? And if it's not, how do you change? And as you say, where for you it's diet and exercise and training and all of that, it's the very same thing for people who need to then diet away from certain behaviors. And they need to start to make those changes. And if they spend the same effort that you make and you're talking about here, all of a sudden, they're going to experience an entirely different life. And as you say, it has to go step by step, and it may take months, it may take a few years, whatever that happens to be. But as long as that goal is still in your mind and you have that mindset and that mental toughness to accomplish it, there you are. So as we close, and I always hate the fact that time just goes by so fast, but if you could share just a brief message with the folks, what would that be?
I think the message would be this. It would be, we all get stuck from time to time. We get stuck in patterns of decision, of circle, feeling like we're on the treadmill. It's not our fault, right? We're programmed, our psychology, the decision science, genetics, all of these things are programmed to keep us in place. So it's not your fault, but it is your responsibility. Like if you want to change your life, if you really want to have something that, you kind of look back and you're super proud of, then it's not going to happen by default. You got to go and do something. And you've got to get outside that comfort zone. There's kind of 3 elements. There's number 1 is raise your expectations. Think more of yourself. You are capable of more, even though you doubt yourself. The second one is, as soon as you set that goal, you're going to doubt yourself even more because you haven't been that person up until now, but that doesn't mean you can't be that person today and every day moving forwards. And then the third part is you got to work. I know. Sorry about that. This is the disappointment, is that we can't have our cake and eat it. We can't have work-life balance, not during the come up, right? We have to sacrifice, but be smart. Give something up to get something. And if you have that mentality over a period of time and you keep showing up and you're disciplined and you're consistent and you put in the work, you're going to be somewhere. and it's going to be a lot closer to the person you're proud of than where you started.
Oh, I love it. Dan, thanks so much. This has been a wonderful conversation. I really appreciate your insights. This is great. Thank you for being on the show.
Thank you. It's taken me a while to get here, but I hope the journey of me trying to figure stuff out has helped some people today.
How can people find your books and how can they find you?
So people can find me on danstorey.com. That's the website, and my books are all on Amazon. So if you look for Dan Storey or look for the Personal Transformation Blueprint, you'll find that. I also have a podcast, which is the Personal Transformation Podcast, where I get to have these conversations with other people who, when I look at those three aspects of changing expectation, dealing with imposter syndrome, and sacrifice and putting the work in, I want to explore those a little bit more as well. And then just as a little teaser for listeners, the next book is going to be literally Unstuck. It's about how do we understand our psychology and our wiring, so that, like I said, it's not our fault, but it is our responsibility. So that's coming out soon. And that, again, will be my journey as an author to bring that out as well.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Dan. I really appreciate it. And folks, thanks for listening. I hope this has made a difference for you. And we look forward to having you join us again soon. This is Dr. Doug saying namaste.